There's no great podcast. They don't generate any money. And I don't see where she is going from here. I think she has
Love Meghan. For what to watch? Who wants to watch Meghan Markle bake a pie?
Call her Meghan Markle instead
It'll
of...
Meghan snaps after Tom Bauer exposes real reason Netflix canceled her show for a long time. Public conversations around Meghan Markle were driven by intensity, strong reactions, fierce defenses, sharp criticism, and constant debate. But before any discussion of cancellation, backlash, or collapse ever entered the picture, something quieter and far more consequential occurred. Nothing happened. No surge of outrage. No viral outrage cycles. No defensive campaigns. No urgent counter. Instead, Meghan Markle's latest Netflix project drifted out of public focus almost without resistance. Industry observers noticed not because the numbers were catastrophic or the reviews unusually harsh, but because the emotional temperature surrounding the project never rose at all. Asterisk in the world of streaming platforms, that absence speaks louder than criticism. Asterisk when the show arrived, it didn't provoke cultural argument. It didn't fracture opinion into camps. It simply existed, briefly, and then receded. Inside the industry, that kind of response triggers a different kind of concern. Not how do we defend this, but why are we still talking about it at all? Asterisk those closest to the platform began to describe a sense of disengagement. Not rejection, not embarrassment, just a gradual emotional projects that carry belief are protected. They are reframed, repositioned, explained. This one wasn't. Promotion didn't escalate. Messaging didn't sharpen. Executives didn't step forward to contextualize its purpose. Asterisk the show didn't collapse. It cooled. That distinction matters, because failure in entertainment rarely announces itself dramatically. It drifts. Meetings move on. Talking points disappear. And eventually, the project becomes something no one volunteers to explain. That's not cancellation. That's institutional detachment. Asterisk critics, meanwhile, struggled to articulate exactly what felt off. It wasn't outrage. It wasn't even disappointment in the traditional sense. Many viewers described the experience as effortful. Episodes stretched on. Engagement felt forced. Interest faded before curiosity ever fully formed. Asterisk some commentators described the series as emotionally empty. Not provocative, not challenging, not particularly illuminating, just strangely inert. A show that existed because it had to, not because anyone knew why it needed to. Asterisk what unsettled industry insiders wasn't whether audiences liked it. It was how quickly internal conversations stopped revolving around it. Momentum vanished almost immediately. The project didn't offend. It didn't shock. It landed at an emotional frequency that didn't match the moment it entered. Asterisk, the question that quietly replaced all others was simple. Who is this for right now? That question never found a convincing answer. As this quiet disengagement unfolded behind the scenes, royal biographer Tom Bauer reframed the discussion in a way that cut deeper than standard criticism. Rather than questioning honesty or intent, he pointed to something far more destabilizing: emotional timing. Asterisk, according to Bauer, the issue was never whether Meghan's feelings were genuine. It was how they were presented. Carefully paced, cleanly delivered, fully contextualized before the audience ever had room to process them organically. Asterisk authenticity, he suggested, isn't measured by truth alone. It's measured by friction, by hesitation, by moments that feel unresolved or imperfect. When vulnerability arrives too polished, too evenly packaged, audiences instinctively pull back, not in anger, but in doubt. Asterisk viewers didn't ask whether the emotions were real. They asked why they were being presented this way. Asterisk the storytelling felt complete before it began. Nothing lingered. Nothing invited discovery. Every emotional beat arrived pre-processed, emotionally concluded, and safely framed. And when everything is explained, nothing stays with you. Asterisk that subtle shift changed how the entire project was perceived. What once might have felt reflective began to feel instructional. Vulnerability, when delivered like a thesis rather than a confession, weakens connection rather than strengthening it. Asterisk at the same time, public commentary increasingly questioned the premise itself. The idea that marriage into royalty automatically confers lifestyle authority didn't land as expected. Viewers weren't hostile. They were unconvinced. Asterisk people didn't argue. They scrolled. Asterisk and for a platform built on retention, indifference is fatal. Algorithms can't optimize apathy. There's no controversy to amplify. No outrage to redirect. Just a flat line. Asterisk when that happens, platforms don't pull plugs publicly. They pause. They delay. They stop asking what's next. And once a system stops needing you to explain your work, it has already moved on. Asterisk, this wasn't about ratings alone. It was about relevance thinning quietly. Asterisk, while this emotional cooling took place in the streaming world, a very different kind of unraveling was happening elsewhere. In a courtroom. Asterisk when Prince Harry took the stand. Observers expected legal argument, timelines, evidence, procedure. What they witnessed instead felt far more personal. Asterisk, his testimony wasn't delivered like a strategic defense. It sounded layered. accumulated as if years of unresolved grievance had finally found a setting that couldn't edit, soften, or redirect it. He wasn't simply responding to questions. He was reliving experiences. Each answer carried weight beyond the case itself, and that weight landed unevenly in a space designed for precision, not emotion. At one point, the judge intervened, reminding him that it was not his role to emote or characterize behavior, but to answer questions directly. That moment mattered, not because it was dramatic, but because it revealed a crack in restraint. There were no cutaways, no music, no framing language, just raw delivery. For the first time in a long while, the emotion wasn't curated. Coverage began to shift as a result. Commentary moved away from legal outcomes and towards something more unsettling. The sense that this moment wasn't about victory or vindication. It was about unresolved history demanding acknowledgement in the only environment left that couldn't mute it, and that contrast raised an uncomfortable question. If this is what uncontained emotion looks like, what had everything else been? That question lingered. Back on the streaming side, viewers began noticing absences, not accusations, but omissions. No visible pause to address fractures already known. No acknowledgement of tensions that hovered just outside the frame. The storytelling felt segmented. Emotion placed into safe compartments. Vulnerability curated where it could be controlled. Audiences don't expect total transparency. They understand boundaries. But when a narrative promises intimacy while carefully avoiding its most destabilizing tensions, trust erodes quietly. Not through outrage, through reinterpretation. Suddenly, moments that once felt warm felt selective, not manipulative, but strategic. And public perception doesn't wait for nuance. It reacts to contrast, what's offered versus what's withheld. By the time critics articulated these concerns, most viewers had already felt them. Something wasn't missing accidentally. Something had been stepped around deliberately. This realization didn't spark backlash. It sparked detachment. Across memoirs, interviews, and long-form projects, a pattern emerged. Deeply personal moments released at precise intervals. Emotional disclosures framed carefully. Then silence. Nothing accidental. And that precision became the problem. Audiences don't reject vulnerability because it's too much. They pull away when it starts to feel scheduled. When emotion arrives with polish instead of hesitation. Empathy shuts down quietly, not in protest, but in self. Each new release felt less like discovery and more like continuation, expected, predictable. And predictability is dangerous. Without friction, there's no tension. Without tension, there's nothing for the audience to hold emotionally. The narrative shifted from resistance to maintenance, from defiance to upkeep. By the time questions arose about renewals and seasons, the conversation had already cooled. What was presented as continuation felt more like reconfiguration, not collapse, but rebranding of something already purchased. Engagement didn't disappear dramatically. It thinned. This is the phase most people miss. From the outside, everything still looks intact. Contracts exist. Relationships remain polite. But inside the system, urgency is gone. Speed slows. Responses delay. Conversations lose momentum. In industries driven by relevance, speed equals belief. And belief had clearly moved elsewhere. Decline doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives as administration. Optionality sets in. And optional is fatal. This is what Tom Bauer was pointing toward without dramatizing it. Not exile, not collapse, detachment. A system no longer organizing itself around your presence. There's nothing to fight, no villain, no decision to appeal. Just the realization that doors aren't closing. They're simply no longer opening. That's why the story persists. Not because people are furious, not because sides are being taken, but because audiences recognize something familiar unfolding in real time. The exhaustion of being emotionally instructed, the quiet resistance to narratives that arrive fully framed and emotionally concluded. This isn't just one couple's story. It's a case study in modern influence, in how relevance doesn't disappear through opposition, but through fatigue. Influence fades when audiences stop needing explanation, and when that happens, the story doesn't end. It stops leading. Each appearance carries less weight. Each response lands softer. Even significant moments struggle to command attention. Control slips without confrontation. If there was a moment where that loss became impossible to ignore, it wasn't on a streaming platform. It happened in a courtroom, where emotions surfaced without filters, where years of pressure spilled into a setting that demanded restraint. That contrast tells you everything. This isn't a story about cancellation. It's about erosion, about what remains when emotional authority thins and the audience quietly steps back. And once that happens, the next chapter belongs not to the subjects, but to the observers. Because authenticity can't be forced. Vulnerability can't be scheduled. And once audiences sense they're being guided rather than invited,